This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Thursday, February 6, 2020, and my guest is Ryan Whitwam of Android Police. Hi, Ryan, how are you?
It is a delight to be here.
Yes. So in case you're wondering, we're actually in the same room. We're at Moto headquarters in Chicago, where we just got to play with the new G series phones. Yes, I said G series. There is no numbering this year. It's not G8.
Yeah.
It's not G9 or 7 because they've already done 7. It's just G.
Yeah. Last year was G7.
How do you feel about that?
I feel like that's probably fine. I always have felt like it was so easy to confuse Motorola and LG devices, like when you're reading an article about something. Oh yeah, right. Because like they
one
almost
off,
matched.
Right?
Yeah.
G8 is LG last year, and G7 is LG last year.
I mean, and I feel like it's fine, especially in this case, because the two phones that they announced, it's the G Power and the G Stylus. So the name has like the thing that makes it distinct. So like you could just you don't have to say like this is the G8 and this is the other G8 and like there are 5 things that are almost identical. Like these are pretty distinct products, even though they share a lot of like basic hardware features.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like for me it's a smart thing. I think this is a good decision. I feel like this numbering stuff should go away. It's like I feel like Apple would be the poster child for this. I'm actually surprised they haven't done it yet.
Yeah, like the MacBooks don't attach numbers to those except for like the screen size. Like you just have to like know like this is the MacBook 13 from like late 2013 or whatever,
Right. And iPhone, they're still doing the iPhone 11, and I kind of feel like Apple should be a long time ago now should have just gone to iPhone.
The numbers are dumb. Like on every product, it's totally pointless. Like as far as we're aware, all the rumors point to Samsung just like going from 10 to 20 and
kind of like following essentially in Huawei's lead here with the P series and the Mate series going from 10 to 20. I think kind of Apple's kicking themselves now for doing 11. Although on the other hand, you could look at it and say, well, it's very unique. They have 11. Nobody else has 11. Anyway, back to the G series. So you're right. I think this is a crux here. There is a G Stylus and a G Power. And strangely, last year there was a G8 Plus.
There was, yeah.
So
we've
but
never
I think they really resolved this.
I think they only launched that in like a few like Latin America, I think mostly.
Yeah, but it's interesting if their naming strategy is changing.
Yeah. They didn't even really want to talk to us about that phone.
It's like, that phone, these are not the droids you're looking for, wave of hand. I feel like pretty positive about what I saw today on these G series phones. To be very clear, the only difference between them is colors, prices, battery size, and the stylus or no stylus.
Yeah.
Storage.
The cameras are also slightly different.
There is, I think it's mostly software differences on the camera. From what I understand, the action feature is a software feature. Yes, I was told that.
I see. I think someone told me that it was a combination of hardware and software.
I think they said that there was a reason why they couldn't do the cropping, which is we're going to talk about this in more detail in a second. But just so you understand, the action feature on Moto phones is this weird thing, and so far the only device that has this is a Moto One Action, where they use the ultra-wide lens, and basically they're using the sensor in portrait mode to shoot landscape by cropping.
So you hold the phone normally vertically, but you're shooting landscape like wide-angle video.
So the idea is that if you're doing shooting something action-packed, you can hold your phone vertically, portrait mode with one hand, and still record landscape horizontal video.
I mean, I wish I could do that with photos too, honestly. Like I would like phones to just do that, because I've never liked holding a phone landscape to take pictures. It's not comfortable. That's why everybody shoots vertical pictures all the time. It's easier.
Well, what we need now is a square sensor that is allowing you to basically crop any position any way you want. That's what we need for these things.
Yeah, but so these phones, they share like a lot of features, but like the names tell you like what the shtick is, you know?
Right.
So the G Power, it has a giant battery. It's 5,000 milliamp hours,
which is the same as last year's G7 Power, by the way. If you're keeping track at home, the G7 Power last year, I reviewed it for Geekspin. If you want to check out that review, it did make some compromises that this year is not.
It was like one of the more down market versions of the G.
It had
series.
a 720p display.
Yeah,
and it wasn't horrible, but you could feel it. It's not like the iPhone 11.
I feel like I could tell like when I was looking at it, it looked soft.
It's not like the iPhone 11 where you can. The LCD is so good that you can see maybe when you get close up to it that it could use more pixels, but overall.
Yeah, but this time it's, the regular, well spec'd for a mid-range phone that has the giant battery, and that's cool. I think that's it makes it a much more compelling device, especially at $250, which that's the price of that one, which is cheaper than last year.
Yeah, it's interesting that Moto's, I think, learning that lesson where in the past with the G series, in particular the G series, when they put them on sale, they seemed a little pricey, and they would quickly drop in price because of discounts.
Yeah.
And so you'd always wait for the discount because then the G series really made sense. But it seems that this year, pricing the Stylus at $300, and as you said, the Power at $250, we're starting off roughly at a price point that feels right for this market.
Yeah.
And they're going to go down $50 within a month anyway. So now it's going to really be a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the pricing last year, Motorola probably saw Nokia kind of eating their lunch a little bit, because Nokia's come out with a lot of really compelling mid-range devices, and they weren't really competing on price like they have in the past. Motorola, I mean, hasn't been competing. But this gen, I think, is looking a lot more value oriented. And obviously, the Stylus, I think it's an interesting device. I think it'll be a tougher sell, even though you get more storage. The Stylus means that you get 1,000 fewer milliamp hours in the battery because they had to have room in the phone for the Stylus to slot in.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I didn't check the specs on the size and thickness, but I have a feeling the power might be slightly thicker.
I believe it is. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because that.
But it's. I mean, I think we're talking like half a millimeter.
We're talking minimal. Imperceptibly thicker.
Yeah. But I mean, still, 4,000 milliamp hours in a mid-range phone that's not bad.
I think it's pretty good. So yeah, they say that 3 days of battery life, and how much for the Stylus?
2.
3 days is probably a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, you can always, expect to lose maybe 20% off of the stated battery life on anything.
Yeah, I feel like I think you're going to see a day and a half and 2 days on these phones.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it saves you from the range anxiety. If you'll get through the day without trouble, no matter what you do to the phone, I think that matters more to people than a phone that they can use for 3 days.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, I'm on board. I love the G Power for its endurance, and I'm only regret about it is that it was decontented in other ways, which we're not seeing this year. Yes, there's some differences with the action mode or whatever, but that's a minor thing. When you're going to shoot mostly normal videos and photos on these phones, you're going to get the same cameras on both. You're going to get the same processor on both, the same amount of RAM on both. We're looking at a ton of similarities, which I think we should start talking about. Let's talk about the cameras, because I think the cameras are really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we're a year after the G7, we're now seeing a lot of the functionality and features from the Moto 1 series trickling down right into that $250 to $300 range with no excuses, no restrictions. We get night mode. We get a 48 megapixel main sensor. They didn't give us the f-stops, or at least I haven't looked at the specs.
I think it's on the spec sheet, but yeah, but no. So and they actually will let you shoot in 48 megapixel mode. It automatically will. I think it bins down to 12. I think, but you can do the full resolution if you want.
Yeah, so from my understanding, it's a Samsung sensor, like what we've seen on the Moto 1 Zoom, and I think maybe the Action as well, Moto 1 Action. It's basically a sensor that they've had for a year now on their phones, and they feel pretty confident that they've managed to tune it pretty well. So I'm not expecting the level of performance from as we see from a Sony 48 megapixel like the IMX586, but I think it's going to be pretty good. And I feel like, having 3 lenses on a phone at this price point is pretty incredible. You're going to say, well, Miriam, you can buy a Xiaomi phone and a Honor phone or like
you can in some places.
An Oppo phone that is way better spec for $250, but that's, you're not going to get the band support you get in the US here. Like, this will work on Verizon and Sprint. Yeah. This will be, not just unlocked, but actually pretty universal.
I mean, and it has a US warranty.
No, but not only that, to me, the big difference is pure Android, almost pure Android. It's pure Android Plus, which is way better than even like a Galaxy or something.
Yeah. I mean, I like Motorola's build of Android. I don't think they've really like innovated with it a lot in the last couple of years, but the stuff that they've had for, half a decade now is still pretty good. Like, Moto Display is still really nice.
Yeah, no, I think that this is good. So cameras, the other 2 cameras, let's talk about them really quickly. There is a 2 megapixel macro camera, which I think is really interesting because not only, I mean, we've seen 2 megapixel macro cameras before, but this one is autofocus, which many of them don't. You literally have to find the sweet spot by hand.
Yeah, so this one, you can, I think it's like as close as 2 centimeters from the target, but you have a little bit of leeway in that.
But it is autofocus, so it'll track.
Yep.
Whereas the Honor that came out in the summer, that has a 2 megapixel macro, does not have autofocus. You literally have to find the spot by moving the phone back and forth. And if you move just a little bit, it's macro, so you're instantly off, right? So that's kind of one of the things that I thought was annoying. The other thing, it has an 8 megapixel ultra wide, 117-degree fields of view. And ultra wide is always a winner to me. If you're gonna have multiple cameras, have an ultra wide.
I prefer zoom. Like, if I could only have like one camera in addition to the regular wide. So you're a happy
person using the Pixel 4 then?
Yeah, if Google was gonna only do 2 cameras, I think they did the right 2 cameras.
See, I think they did the wrong 2 cameras. I think Apple did the right 2 cameras with the 11. That's why I have an 11 in one pocket and a Pixel 4 in the other. One does ultra wide and proper video recording. The other one does proper zoom and a great main camera.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the interest in having ultra wide sensors. I would love to have like the regular wide and a zoom and an ultra wide, like all 3 on a phone. That's ideal. But we're talking about phones that cost $250, $300. You're not going to get everything.
No. So anyway, 48 megapixel Samsung, basically binning 4 pixels into one quad pixel, whatever you want to call it, and a 2 megapixel macro with autofocus and 8 megapixel ultra wide. No zoom lens, but presumably with 48 megapixels on the main lens, you can get
crop
some
down
good stuff.
Good, yeah.
And then we're looking at basically the usual suite of Moto camera features, including things like cinemagraph and the action mode for the Stylus. Yeah. And I think all this is good, is positive. I don't expect the camera to be outstanding, but I feel that it's probably going to be good enough to be very competitive in that price point.
I think it'll be noticeably better than what they had last year.
Yeah. And I mean, last year, the G series have always been okay, I feel, for their price, but never spectacular. And I don't expect this to be spectacular either, but I expect this to be a pretty big step forward. Like, this is really going from just a depth assist camera as in the G7 to like, now we have literally dedicated cameras for specific purposes. You don't, at least in the US, see that at a $250 price point, right?
Yeah, not often.
No. There's a fingerprint reader in the back, which is nicely hidden as a Moto logo, which I think is cool. There's a headphone jack. These are features that are across both phones. We mentioned the specs on the RAM and the 665. Interesting choice of 665. I've been using a Moto One Hyper, which we'll segue into in a minute. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it's running a 675. And I'm really impressed with the performance on that phone. Like, how you're an Android user, you know that. Even on a Pixel, right? After a lot of multitasking for several hours, you start getting some lag every now and then if you don't restart apps. Yeah. Sometimes you touch something and you just have to wait just a tiny bit of time for it to do something. And I wasn't using that phone yesterday from the moment I woke up to basically the moment I landed in my hotel room in Chicago. I used it for the entire 4-hour flight on Wi-Fi, and not a single time juggling at least a half a dozen apps did it lag or delay or stutter or stop, and I was not expecting that from a 675. So hopefully the 665 is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to look up the specs, but I imagine it's probably just a slower clock on like the same.
I think I'm not quite sure how generation. The problem with the numbering at Qualcomm is that it doesn't always match generationally.
Yeah.
Like I feel that the 8s and 7s,
especially in the 6s, like there are some 6s that are like way different than the others.
Yeah, the 7 and 8 series tend to match nicely. Like basically, we have this year we have a 765 and 865. Last year with the 855, but that was closely matching the 730, right? And then the 845 was a 710. Now, they didn't match in numbers, but if you knew that they were in the same kind of silo. But interestingly, here's the funny thing. When the 855 was king last year, the 730 was king of its 7th tier, but that was based on an 845. So you know what I'm saying? Like, so the 710 was based on an 835 when the 845 was king. And so I'm not sure if I think they broke that pattern with the 765. I feel like the 765 is its own thing. And I know we're not talking about 7 series on these G phones, but I'm just like segueing here.
Yeah, well, it's Qualcomm's bad numbering.
Bad at numbering.
I mean, so this SoC should be like, a nice step up from what they had last gen. I mean, when I was using the phones, I felt like they were pretty responsive. But I mean, obviously these are like brand new and like, very few things installed on it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was wondering when I used that Moto Hyper yesterday on my way in, whether it's just because it's brand new. But I don't remember in recent history using a 6 series Qualcomm phone that felt that fast.
Yeah.
And it's Android 10.
Yeah.
And by the way, these two phones, the G Stylus and the G Power, are Android 10, which is great.
I mean, part of that might just be like, I feel like Google paid a lot more attention to the way animations feel in Android 10. Android 10 devices, for me at least, they tend to be a smoother experience. Maybe they're just like they're hiding the lag better. I don't know, but no. I mean, I'm pretty encouraged by what I've seen of the new Moto G phone so far.
What do you feel about the display? It's 6.4 inches, 19 by 9 full HD. It's IPS, right? It's LCD.
Yeah. I think they look fine. I did notice something you see on IPS panels sometimes, like a little bit of like shadowing, like at the edges. There's no, and especially so there's a hole punch. There's no, they got rid of the notch. There's the hole punch for the front facing camera in the upper left corner, and if you look like around that, you can see like that very sort of subtle like shadow that just sort of shows up at the edge of IPS panels. And I've noticed that like a lot on some Nokia phones, and some not so much. I'm not sure what the aspect of the manufacturing like makes things look like that, but it's not super distracting. And I think like the resolution at that size is probably fine.
I mean, it's 1080p, so
yeah. I mean, and it's because it's LCD. There are still there's some bezel. Yeah. Because you can't get like way down there without OLED. So like there's a chin at the bottom that's a little bit bigger than like the rest of the bezels. But it's not as stark.
Not as bad as the G7 last year, where there was enough bezel to write the word Moto on them.
Yeah.
Which they did. The other thing I want to point out is, since you brought up the hole punch camera, it's a 16 megapixels on both phones, whatever that means. We don't know other specs on it, but it's nice to see that maybe they are paying attention to the front camera with those specs. But I'm happy. I'm excited. I think that this is cool. And again, I feel like the G series has always been kind of close to my heart. I feel like, yes, I like Chinese imports. I have a lot of them, but I'm a special use case, right? Like I mostly use GSM carriers like T-Mobile and AT&T. I don't worry about Sprint or Verizon, compatibility. I don't care about warranty. I'm willing to live with the skin and like put another launcher and work stuff out.
Yeah, you're what we colloquially call a phone nerd.
Yeah, like you.
Right. Yeah,
like the people listening.
Yeah.
But the point is that for if you're gonna recommend a phone that's not a flagship to somebody in North America, US or Canada, that needs a good solid phone, maybe they're coming from an older Nexus or Pixel phone, and they can't really justify buying, the new Pixel, and they saw the 3A and they like feel like I want something more modern looking, like with little bezel and a hole punch and all that. We can give them that now with the G series, and they won't feel too alienated.
So I mean, and the G series it's cheaper than the Pixel 3A.
Yeah, it is
by a fairly significant
by $100.
Margin. I mean, I feel like if you got money to spend on a Pixel 3A, that's a better phone. You should buy that. But yeah, if you don't want to spend that much, then I feel like the new Moto Gs might be a really good option.
Yeah, because they feel really modern, and like they have, that look and feel of a phone of 2020 with a hole punch and all that, and with the multiple cameras in the back. And at the same time, to me, the biggest gripe I have when I import these Chinese phones and use them, or I get review units of them, is as soon as I start using the software, I just want to rip my hair out, right? And this is not going to give you that, and a warranty, and support for Verizon Sprint. So yes, it might be a little more money than you would spend on, an equivalent Oppo, but consider that you're getting, all these little details. It's like the difference between buying a Pixel 4 versus buying, last year's K20 Pro is a good example. Redmi K20 Pro is an amazing phone for the money. Snapdragon 855, triple camera on the back with a telephoto ultra wide and 48 megapixel IMX586. I mean,
yeah, everything. It's great hardware, but you have to deal with
$300.
You have to deal with the software,
but then you have this terrible, terrible software experience. And again, I can live with it by putting another launcher and keyboard on there, but you can't change the notification tray and the fact that it's messed up. And so I think there's a market for this, even amongst our type of people, our early adopter tech savvy crowd.
Yeah, so they didn't tell us exactly when they'll come out. They just said spring.
Yeah, they said soon. I think we're going to see them come out right after MWC. I figure by mid-March to late March, something like that.
I would bet on like the end of March or the beginning of April.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's close enough. Yeah. So yeah, the reason I brought up the Moto Hyper a couple of times is because, as I said, I just got it out of the box. I also have a Moto 1 Action and a Moto 1 Zoom to play with, but I couldn't take all three of them on this trip. And I find that the best way to really put a phone through its paces is to kind of use it as your main phone on a 2-day trip like this and do everything you can on it. And then you learn really quickly what sucks and what doesn't. Yeah. And so far, when they showed me this phone in Hawaii at the Snapdragon Summit, I don't know why they decided to show up, and Moto showed up in Hawaii with a phone that had nothing to do with anything Qualcomm was showing at that event. But nonetheless, they showed up this Moto Hyper, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, it's cool. But in my mind, I was like, $350 for this? That's a lot of money. I can get something again. I can get something from Vivo, or Oppo, or Xiaomi, or Huawei for a lot less money. But then I realized, because to be fair, the One doesn't have support for Verizon and Sprint. The One series is GSM only. So, but then you get a warranty, and then I started playing with it. And yes, it's plastic in the sense that it's fake glass in the back, and it's not like, it does look like a glass sandwich. It does feel pretty well made, but you're not getting aluminum and glass here. You're getting, whereas you do get aluminum glass on some of these Chinese phones, right? So, yeah, I kind of dismissed it a bit, basically, is what I'm saying, when I first got my hands on it. And now that I've used it for a bit, I'm like, oh no, this is actually way better than I expected. And I feel like I'm having a good experience. And primarily the performance, as I said. Battery life was another thing. I had it fully charged. I left the house at like 7 in the morning or something, 8 in the morning. And I landed at a specific time. I landed at my hotel room at 6:30 Central Time, which is like 4:30 Pacific. So I'm running this phone for like, 8 hours straight. And I'm 60% battery life when I get there.
Pretty good.
Like,
what's the battery capacity?
I think it's 5,000, I want to say, or maybe a bit less, 4. But no matter what, it held up with me multitasking like a boss. Now, I didn't take any photos. I wasn't playing games. I wasn't viewing video content. I was literally just in email, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that kind of stuff. Productivity. Yeah. Because, as you know, as journalists, we have to be on the social media for productivity.
Yes, Twitter is work.
Yeah. And I was posting some Instagram photos from my Google Photos gallery. And I'm telling you, like, that thing, battery life-wise, was like pretty cool. Now, I haven't used the cameras much on it. It has a 64 megapixel, I think it's a Samsung sensor. And it has an ultra-wide, and that's it. It has 2 lenses. And then it has a pop-up camera for the front-facing.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's got like that channel thing.
Yeah,
that,
exactly, in the back. Yeah. So what I'm saying is basically, verdict still pending for the camera. So far the camera seems okay, but not like. Again, I think there's this tendency right now because the higher end phones have started using, like, especially because Sony's IMX586, the first truly widely used and popular 48 megapixel sensor that did the quad pixel binning, the 4-in-1 pixels, and used the quad Bayer filter, is kind of the poster child, and it's used throughout like a whole range of phones up to the super high-end flagship.
We see that part a lot.
We've seen it everywhere. And depending on how it's implemented, it's either really good or really bad. An example of really good would be, again, the Honor 20 Pro blew me away with its IMX586 implementation. It's probably the best I have used by a long shot. A bad implementation of that sensor in a similarly priced $500 phone is the Axon 10 Pro from ZTE.
Yep.
That phone's camera is so bad for what the specs are. Yeah. It's purely a software issue.
Yeah, no, and in a lot, I mean, I feel like the megapixel race is kind of back on. Like, especially like in the mid-range, like they all want to say, like, look at how many megapixels this phone has.
And it's exactly what I'm saying. And so now we're starting to see the second generation of that, right? We're starting to see where people are going like, oh yeah, we're going to make a phone that basically is just like this like get the numbers, but doesn't actually have the performance to back it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in this day and age, like it is so much more important to have good processing than like just buying the best piece of hardware you can.
In a way, and this is going to apply to the G series as well. I feel that the fact that they have a 48 megapixel sensor, and here we're talking about the Hyper with a 64 megapixel sensor, I think here they're going on bragging rights here a little more than they're going on actual results. Yeah. Like, as I said, very preliminary. I will talk to you folks more about the Moto Hyper's camera once I use it a little more. But right now, from the few photos I've taken in Chicago and around, in the very snowy Chicago day, I can say that I'm not seeing any difference between that and a well-sorted 12 megapixel or 48 megapixel. And it doesn't mean it's bad. I'm just saying that, it's a lot of bragging rights at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's way more important that just that you have 3 different useful cameras on those phones. Like, it's nice that you have, like, different shooting options, because so many cheap phones are just like, it's a regular camera, also here's a depth sensor camera that doesn't really do anything for you. They just want to have the two cameras. Like they're all chasing the DxO score or whatever. Like you get more points if you have more cameras.
Yeah, basically. It's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, don't get too hung up, and I think my audience is pretty smart. They think they know. Don't get hung up on the megapixels. That being said, those high megapixel counts that we're seeing up to, there's rumors of 108 on the Samsung phones coming up. Like, a lot of this is going to be about binning pixels. So the output of these cameras, the 48 megapixel cameras output 12 megapixel. It's divide by 4. And the 64 outputs, again, divide by 4, right? So you're getting 16 megapixel photos. And then, if we see 108, you're going to say divide by 4. Yeah, that works. It's 27, right? But 27 seems too high to me. So I think what we're going to see in the high end soon is going to be divide by 9. You know what I'm saying? So basically, they're going to do a 3x3 matrix instead of a 2x2 matrix of pixels. They're going to bin 3x3 instead of binning 2x2. And so now you're going to have 9 in 1, 9 pixels to make up 1.
Yeah, I mean, but OEMs are they're definitely still going to call it a 108 megapixel sensor as much as they possibly can.
But so what I'm trying to say is that even though the megapixel count is a lot out of control and sometimes it's used for marketing, especially on the lower end phones and the second generation sensors that are not that good, but I think there is some true value to binning. And I think the next generation of binning we're going to see, instead of 4-to-1 binning, is going to be 3x3, 4-9-to-1.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, I think, an important advancement, because that's something that is mainly hardware dependent, so you don't have to be a company with very good software processing capabilities. You can still see some benefit from this.
Exactly. You're immediately seeing some benefits, but at the same time, you're still highly dependent on the software, because I thought the same way as you. I thought that you couldn't go wrong especially with the Sony IMX586, the first one. But when I saw what ZTE did with the Axon 10 Pro, I was like, how? How is it possible that it's worse?
They've made a lot of camera mistakes. I think ZTE just, they need to rethink
They need
that,
some help.
man.
Yeah. Cool. So let's talk some more. We got a couple of more Moto things to talk about, specifically around the Razr. So what is your take on the Razr kind of review-ish reviews? I don't know. Like, there's been some early reviews because some people are getting their phones early.
Some people who pre-ordered have gotten the devices. So I don't think we've gotten any like major exhaustive reviews of them, but I think generally people seem to like that the phone exists, but there are some issues. I've seen there are a couple of videos floating around of like people opening the hinge and it kind of like makes like a creaking sound. Like it's sort of unnerving. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure these are fresh off the assembly line. Like the glue is still drying. So
the things this week in terms of the Razr is that as of today, like we're recording this on February 6th, and you'll probably hear this on February 7th or 8th. But on the 6th, as we're recording this, the phone is officially available in stores to line up and pick up, basically. If you've pre-ordered, by now, unless you pre-ordered late because they're back-ordered, you should have received your phone today.
Yeah. But good luck just going into a store and buying one.
But I mean, theoretically.
Yeah.
And then some people have received their phones early, which means that some journalists have received their phones early that they actually bought rather than getting devices. And as such, they have reviews out. And one of the things you've seen, as you mentioned, is not just amongst the journalists that received their phones, but amongst demo units at stores, this creaking sound in the hinge, which I think people are probably blowing out of proportion. I have a feeling that maybe 1% of the phones out there have this problem because they're finally in production. The reason I'm saying this is because when I played with the Moto Razr in November, it really felt, and maybe these were hand-assembled prototypes, but it felt so solid, that hinge, and that design felt like it really felt like I could drop kick that phone. Yeah. And you can't think of doing that with a Fold, right? And I feel like that either this is an odd case and there's a few early things, people are going to get them replaced and it'll be fine, or it's a bigger problem and maybe we were wrong. And maybe, because I feel bad having told everyone after my hands-on in November that I felt this phone was really well sorted in terms of its hinge design, and now we're hearing creaking.
Well, I feel like that might even be just a thing that goes away on a unit. Like after you've used it for a while, maybe the hinge just stops doing that. But I mean, I've handled a few of those phones at this point, and they've all felt really solid to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, I had the opportunity to use one just recently that has apparently been used daily for 2 months.
Yeah.
And it felt fine. There was nothing weird about it. It didn't make any unusual noises, and it still seemed nice and tight when you open and close it, and the screen was still pristine.
Yeah, and so I encourage you. I will link to Android Central. It was one of the outlets that got a review unit that wasn't a review unit. So got
so they have they
published a review.
They have a quick two days with the Razr kind of thing,
based on a phone they purchased and was early delivered to them over the weekend. And they have the creaking problem, and so I'll put that in the show notes. And then there's this crazy rumor, and again, this is a rumor at this point, of a gold Razr.
Yeah, I see no reason why that couldn't be true.
I mean, I want to see a pink one. There was a whole debate in Twitter yesterday, actually, of which hue of pink we want. So what hue of pink are you on board? Because you remember when the original...
The correct answer to this question is the most obnoxiously, bright
loud
neon pink.
So you want the singular version,
I want
the Verizon version.
I want T-Mobile magenta.
Yeah, so remember the V3, the original Razr, had a V3 for, I think it was singular, that was this obnoxious, very bright magenta, basically T-Mobile color today. And then there was, Verizon did one, and it was this super soft, pale pink, very, very subdued.
Google not pink.
It totally represented what these carriers were about in their time, Verizon was much more serious, and Singular was much more playful back in those days. I'm thinking it was Singular. It could have been a T-Mobile version that was super pink, but T-Mobile back then wasn't big on the magenta color scheme.
Yeah.
Anyway, so take that with a grain of salt. Basically, it's inevitable, absolutely, totally inevitable that we're gonna see multiple colors on this Razr over time.
Yeah, let's hope.
Let's hope. And then finally, I will link to Android Police as well on this. There is a teardown video out there that shows off the innards of the Razr. Somebody somehow got their hands on one, and I watched the video at double speed without sound last night because it's a 15-minute video. Trust me, you can watch it at double speed. If you know anything about, if you've ever taken apart a phone, it all makes a lot of sense. But clearly the person who took this apart was quite skilled and definitely a professional at taking phones apart, or had an idea of what to do, because this is, while, if you've taken apart a phone yourself, you know where to go and how it goes. This is so unconventional in its teardown and its design and its the way things are put together, how many connectors and screws there are. It's not for the faint of heart. Let's put it this way.
And it's got the two tiny batteries inside.
Yeah,
it's so interesting.
So we knew this was going to happen. There's a battery in each half, basically. One is smaller than the other, and one is actually glued to the display, which is like, oh boy. And then the other one is glued to the motherboard, which is also, oh boy. But I mean, the reality is, repair. I mean, iFixes will do their usual repairability score at some point.
I'm sure it'll get a very
low number. But I can tell you right now, it's going to be a pretty low number. But if you're a fan of taking things apart and putting them together, or maybe you do phone repairs for a living, you should check this out. It's impressively interesting.
I wonder how repairable this phone will be, even through official channels. Like, if something breaks and you want to have it repaired, I wonder if it's even going to be possible all the time.
Well, I don't think much. I mean, did you not notice that the USB Type-C connector is mounted on the motherboard directly? There is no subboard for it. Immediately, I just cringed when I saw that. Like, oh my god, I can't believe it.
Yeah, iFixit knocks off a lot of points for that, because if something happens to that port, you have to replace the entire port.
I mean, it's really hard to reflow a USB Type-C connector on a
and especially in modern phones when everything is so tiny and so packed together. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those phones, like, if you take it apart, you're not going to be able to put everything back in there. It's
correct.
Like metal spaghetti.
Metal spaghetti. That should be the title of the show. Metal spaghetti with Ryan. So let's talk about some other news. There is the Poco X2, the Poco phone, the new Poco phone, which we all thought was going to be called F2.
Yeah.
It finally is official, and is heavily based on the Redmi K30 Pro, which is a successor to the K20 Pro we were talking about earlier. And there's a review on Android Central already. I guess it's available in India or something.
Yeah.
It is not what you think of when you think of Poco phone. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing. But you think Poco phone, you think best possible processor in the cheapest possible chassis at the most aggressive price point. Now we've switched to best possible features in a aesthetically and materials wise well-sorted chassis at an unbeatable price, because this no longer has an 8 series processor. It's a 730G, and it has a whole bunch of cameras, but it's missing a zoom. I think it has a wide angle and a main and a macro, and then it's a pretty high resolution main camera. I think it's like something like 64. Let me open the link and have a look. I'll put it in the show notes. Android Central reviewed it. What the cool thing though is that it's got a high refresh rate display, so that's really what you came home for.
Yeah, it's 90 hertz, I think.
It's 90 hertz.
Yeah.
No, it's 120 hertz.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that's right.
That's
yes,
120 hertz.
I remember, because they had their teaser website, and if you went to it on another phone, it would make fun of your refresh rate. So, like, I booted up a Razr phone 2 to load it, and it was like, oh yeah, sure, you got 120 hertz, but how much did you pay for that, huh? It was like, it's a really snotty website.
Yeah, so 120 hertz, which is amazing. And it's got, I'm looking at the cameras here real quick. So the main camera is a 64 megapixel, just like that Moto Moto 1 Hyper. And then it's got a couple of more cameras. I can't remember what the specs are on there. But the point is that it's all about the price, right? And I think the price is ridiculous, like $225 or something.
Yeah, I think it's a much more handsome phone than the first one too. Like the first one
and that's
had.
what I was trying to say. Like they didn't focus on the best processor, but really good specs, and they didn't they didn't go on a super cheap chassis. They went on, I don't think it's glass and aluminum, probably plastic, but a pretty attractive, modern-looking glass sandwich-like plastic design.
Yeah. I was always very off-put by the Poco F1's design. Like,
it was pretty cheap.
It had a giant chin and like the notch, and it was just I didn't like it. But like I understand why people liked it because it was so cheap for what you got. I think that this is a better balance. Like maybe it's not like the absolute best hardware, but it's still pretty good, and it looks way better, and it's got like solid features. I mean, I would like this to be a thing in the US.
It is actually. Oh wow! Okay, we're wrong.
What?
According to GSM Arena, which, as you know, is the database of all things.
Yes.
Like it's the master database of all phone universe, and we are thankful. There's a product placement for GSM Arena because that's where I get all my specs from. This is a glass front, glass back aluminum frame.
Oh wow!
Holy crap balls!
Does it say Gorilla Glass? Gorilla Glass.
It says 5? Gorilla Glass 5 front and back. Right?
Wow.
Okay, are you impressed yet?
I would have expected
about
that,
200 euros, which is kind of killer.
But then it's software. I mean, it's what is it?
Well, it's gonna be
MIUI.
MIUI.
It's not my favorite.
I mean, no, but honestly, at that price point, I'm actually going to convert this to USD right now, so we can have a look. $225 freaking dollars.
Yeah.
For a phone with a 120 hertz display, a Snapdragon 730G, a glass and aluminum bulb, and let's check out these cameras real quick. So we have a 64 megapixel main and a 20 megapixel selfie. Oh wait, the selfie is a dual camera, 20 megapixel and 2 megapixel.
Because it's got like the elongated hole punch, like the Galaxy S10
Yeah, it's got a hole punch
Plus.
that's and okay, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel dedicated macro camera, and 2 megapixel depth sensor. Very much like the Oppo phones, the Reno 2.
Yeah.
Which has 4 cameras in the back, but one is a depth, one is a macro. Or actually, on the Renos, the other one is a black and white for dynamic range.
Oh yeah.
And then you got the ultra wide and the 64 meg main. So they don't actually have a telephoto on this, which is interesting because this is based on the K30 Pro, and the K20 Pro prior to it had a telephoto.
Yeah, I feel like that. I mean, that must be more expensive part telephoto cameras.
I mean, yeah, because you pretty much have to have OIS on them. Although some phones, as you know. OnePlus 7T, anyone? Doesn't have OIS on the telephoto, which is a nightmare. But the reality is this. I'm going to put the review from Android Central in the show notes. Check it out. I'm excited by this phone. This is kind of completely the opposite of the G series in the sense that you're getting a lot more money for your bang for your buck. But, again, no warranty, no band support. Like you want 600 megahertz on T-Mobile? Good luck.
It's not going to be a good experience if you import this to the US.
I mean, it's not going to be a horrible experience. And it might be, my point is it might be a compromise you're willing to make.
Yeah, if you live in a place where you'll get good service on that phone and you
want to skin it and put another keyboard and expect no updates for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there might be people on XDA who are going to hack the crap out of it if you're into that.
The XDA crowd for sure. So I'm excited about the Poco X2. It's finally real. It's not what we were expecting, but I think it's solid. All right. The specs for the Galaxy Buds Plus have leaked. So there's we've had Galaxy Buds for a while, since last year, and now we have Buds Plus. And the takeaway is that you get way more battery life, is basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty amazing.
I'm disappointed that there's no active noise canceling. I was hoping that would be the gimmick for the Plus.
Yeah, you'd think they would have gone that route because that's where Apple went with the AirPods Pro.
Yeah.
And Huawei went with the FreeBuds 3. And by the way, by the time you get this podcast, you listen to it, my review of the FreeBuds 3 might be up on Android Police.
It might be. It's been languishing.
It's been languishing in the bottom of the queue. I've been bothering Ruddock about putting it live for a few days now. But bottom line is that active noise cancellation is not to be found on the Buds Plus. from Samsung, and that's a bit unfortunate. But at the same time, the battery life seems killer. It's almost double, like 60%
and it's not
more.
that much more expensive, is it? I think the rumor's like 150. Maybe?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Let me just quickly look. I think we've got it here, so we can have a quick
149.
comparison. Okay, here are all the differences. So we're looking at 149 versus what is it? 129 for the other ones.
So I have the first gen. Galaxy
what do you
Buds.
think? Do you like them?
I love them. They are so good.
They
Especially for the money.
Good?
They sound great.
Awesome, because
and
that's the thing.
I love, and they're really comfortable too. Like you have to be comfortable with like the kind of earbuds that they go in and they really hook into your ears.
Right,
you know,
right.
if you're cool with that, like these are great. Like they aren't super obtrusive. They sound really good. They have like very low latency on all of the phones I've ever tried them on. And if you have a Samsung phone, like the integration is really great.
Of course, yeah.
It's super good.
So here's the battery life numbers: 11 hours versus 6 hours on the buds themselves.
It's almost double. That's pretty good.
22 hours with the case and earbuds versus 13 prior. A dual driver, so woofer and tweeter instead of a single driver. So that's could sound better. And then we've got two microphones, more microphones, so probably better wind reduction and stuff for calls, since it doesn't have noise canceling.
Yeah.
And then the price is only, as you said, $20 more, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, if these are
they're
an
going to
improvement,
just replace essentially the buds for most people.
If this is like a solid improvement over the previous ones.
Multi-device connection support on the Bluetooth 5 versus single-device connection support, whatever that means.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's the nutshell. That's it. There's nothing more to say here. I'm going to link to it. Like, check it out. This is just, I'm going through the news before we get into the rumors. Because the news this week, I was a lot more news than I expected, honestly. Okay, so the next bit, what your thoughts on this? It's pretty much, this is actually not a news item. It's more of a rumor. But it's a pretty well-substantiated rumor. Is the OnePlus 8 having wireless charging? We've been talking about this for weeks now.
Yeah,
but now
finally,
they've joined the wireless
power
consortium, WPC.
Yes.
So we know this is real now, and this has got me very excited because I have a Qi charger next to my bed, and I want to just plug my OnePlus on that. And every time I have a OnePlus, my main phone, I have to like find a cable or something.
Yeah. I'm excited that they're finally doing this. They switched to the glass phones like when everybody else was doing it because that's just what you do. But they never had wireless charging, so it's like, why are we doing the glass backs if you're not going to really take advantage of it? So now supposedly this phone will actually have
that. This is a rumor that you can take with a strong level of certainty. And it's exciting because maybe it's also faster than just basic. Maybe it's 15 or 20 or 30 watts.
Yeah, I mean,
because OnePlus loves fast charging.
I think 15 is totally doable. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
What
would be interesting is if they had kind of like how they have the wired charging on their phones now, where it'll do USB-C power delivery up to whatever 18 watts or 15 watts, I forget which. But then they have dash charging, which goes faster.
Right.
So it would be rad if you could take this and put it on a regular Qi 15-watt stand and get 15-watt charging, but they sell one that's like 25 or 30.
And not Oppo, but Xiaomi has that, and Huawei have that. They both have like 27 and 30 watt proprietary, but backwards compatible.
Yeah.
Another, this is, I kind of mixed up my rumors and leaks with my news. There's another piece of news that's not a rumor, it's hard news. The European Union voted for a standard connector to be implemented.
Yeah.
It's not 100% finalized yet, but it probably means that within a year or two, Apple is going to have to sell their devices in Europe, new devices, with either a new connector, like USB Type-C, I presume, which would make sense, or no connector. Knowing Apple is going to be no connector, and they're going to give the finger to everyone.
So my understanding of this is that there's a lot of the specifics of the implementation is still kind of up in the air, and some people have speculated that maybe this could refer more to the adapter that plugs into the wall, the port on that. I think The Verge posted a story that like called everybody out, like, you guys are wrong. It's just about the wall thing, but they had to retract that because they were going way too far the other way.
Knowing the EU, I'm pretty sure it's the connector on the phone. And,
yeah, that's what I think.
Here's what I'm thinking is going to happen. Apple's going to get an exemption in the same way as there was an attempt to standardize earlier and on USB micro.
Yeah.
And do you remember in Europe they sold this USB
adapter,
micro to Lightning adapter, which was like this weird. I have one, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe they'll make an exemption for. I just look. I know you feel the same way. I know a lot of people who are listening to the show feel the same way. But please, Apple, can we finally get? You've got iPad Pros with USB-C. Can we finally get our iPhones with a standard connector so we can use one charger for everything? Right now, I'm using a charger for everything.
Yeah, I thought this last gen was going to be it. I thought that they would finally.
I thought the 11 was
going to
be it, but no. MFI is a big profit-making machine.
I guess, but man. It's time. Like Apple was one of the first companies to make their computers all USB-C. They clearly, should be doing this now.
Yeah.
And I hope that this makes them do it. I hope that happens. I do have some concern that in the indeterminate future, when the time comes to move beyond USB-C to some other thing, that the EU is going to be like, well, but you can't.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's EU for you. I mean, sometimes it can be problematic to standardize things. But I'm still excited because if it can make Apple move to USB-C or even to portless, which I think would piss off a lot of people.
Yeah, what if like the phone has no ports and like if you want to connect it to data, like there's like a magnetic thing you just stick to the side or something. It's like that the modules that went on the Essential phone, that 60 gigahertz wireless thing.
I mean, that could very well be. I realized why my rumors and news were actually only 2 items. It was the OnePlus 8 wireless charging and the Galaxy Buds Plus specs. That's actually a leak. It's not confirmed yet. Stay tuned because next week we'll be at Samsung in San Francisco, so we'll let you know. More news. LG is skipping MWC, blaming the coronavirus, which is really weird because to me it screams of, we don't really have something exciting to show, and this is a perfect opportunity for us to bow out and save money.
This is what I thought the instant I heard this. Is like they just use that as an excuse.
Yeah, and so for a moment there was a rumor that ZTE was pulling out as well, but that was a false rumor insofar that ZTE, they canceled their press conference, and I think a lot has to do with Chinese employees being able to get to come into let in
the people that they needed to come and do the presentation. They're still in China, and
exactly,
it's hard
and
to get out of China.
Or something. There's a lot of flights that are being screened and canceled now, but they're still going to be there. ZTE was very clear to assure us all that they are not leaving MWC. They're just canceling their press conference for logistical reasons related potentially to Corona, but basically they're going to be there. They're going to have a booth. We're going to be able to see their new products and play with them.
And I don't think LG had even scheduled like a press conference when
they
announced this.
Well, I pinged them earlier, like a week before this happened. I was pinging them hardcore, and I was like, guys, what's going on? And they're like, oh, well, stay tuned. And I'm like, coronavirus, stay tuned. So now we can, I made this joke on Twitter, and I feel very proud of myself because it's a dad joke, and I'm really into dad jokes. So yesterday, I called it Mobile World Congress means, MWC stands for Mobile World Coronavirus. Okay, last bit of news before we wrap up. This is actually, let's see how many minutes we have because this could take a moment of mourning. We have at least 5 minutes we can spend on this.
Okay, good.
So I think we're safe. BlackBerry is dead again, I put in my notes. Zombie BlackBerry came back. Well, BlackBerry came back as a zombie and was a pretty cool zombie for a bit, and now it's definitely dead again.
Yeah, TCL, as of I think August, they are ending their licensing with BlackBerry. So
they're giving away the license to whom?
I mean, I guess just back to BlackBerry, but I mean, there's no news about if anybody else is gonna.
Given up on that.
I mean, there's no news about whether or not some other company is going to start making BlackBerry phones, but it sounds like there are no takers, I would imagine. But yeah, so TCL, they released the Key 1, the Key 2, and the Key 2 LE, and then what was the one that didn't have a keyboard? The Motion, was that it?
Yes.
So they released like 4 phones, the 3 of which were very similar devices.
Oh man, I forgot about the Motion.
Everybody did.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of the reason that this is happening.
I mean, I had the Key 1 and the Key 2. I never got the Key 2 LE, although I requested one. But the Key 2, I felt the Key 1 was interesting, but I felt that the Key 2, other than I would have liked it to be a flagship, like an 800 series chip, which it wasn't. And the camera, of course, had its issues because they don't know how to make cameras at TCL, Alcatel. Sorry, Brad. We love you. But seriously, I hope that this new Alcatel, not Alcatel, this new TCL, 10 series we saw at CES, and we're going to actually find out more about MWC, can take photos. Because Alcatel phones, and of course, there's only been one TCL, so the Plex. The Plex, I haven't played with, so I don't know. But I've always felt like the TCL group of companies, when they made phones, their cameras were very mad because BlackBerry had that problem.
Yeah. But so, I mean, I feel like the people who wanted BlackBerry phones, like they want physical keyboards, are very loud, but they're very small in number. I mean, it's just, I feel like this was always doomed from the start.
But just think, there are, I don't know, it's actually, we're going to look back at this as an interesting thing. I was going to say, let's think of all the people who bought one, because now it's actually like a collectible almost, right? They didn't sell that many. And if you have one, it's still usable as an Android phone, and it's kind of collectible. But I think we're partially, we, the media, we, the journalists, we, the YouTube creators, we, the influencers, who all hang out here at these events, here we're at Moto in Chicago. We are partly responsible for the Key 2 putting it on a pedestal. Because come on, Michael Fisher, Josh Vergara, there's a bunch of us, including myself, even though I didn't want to make it my main phone because I don't type as fast on a physical keyboard. We sang the praises of that phone. We liked it in some weird, quirky, demented way.
I mean, I think that we all kind of like it just because it's weird, and a lot of phones are so similar these days.
Yeah.
It's fun to see something new. I would like to think that Andrew Police's coverage of the Key 1 and Key 2 phones has been balanced. Like we said, hey, this is neat, but also, like, you can probably type faster on a touchscreen. Sorry, that's just the way it is now. I mean, I don't think...
That's the reality.
I don't think that most people... Like, if you're typing with your thumbs, I don't
honestly,
think that you're going to be faster.
Every time I picked up that Key 2 and I started typing, I got frustrated so quickly.
I'm so used
because
to
I
just
couldn't type fast
I'm so
enough.
used to just, like, gently just, like, gliding over the
keyboard. And
keyboard,
then the autocorrect, it fixes half the things.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you need symbols, you need the touchscreen on the U2.
Yeah.
And I use symbols for passwords and stuff. So it's just like, what a pain that was. What a pain. And I'm not saying it was wrong. Some people really loved it, and I get it. They were really fast on it. But I feel like for most people, it's like, that I finally have one of those phones, the FX Tech Pro 1. The landscape slider?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. Great idea, but then when you start using the keyboard, even though the keyboard is amazing, it's like 5 rows, super ergonomic, feels great. I type so much faster on glass. It's not even a contest.
You have to push so hard, and you can only move your thumbs so fast, and it slows you down so much that the quality of touchscreen keyboards has gotten so much better. Is the thing. It's like the autocorrect on a touchscreen is great. There's like glide typing. They're like the prediction for like what you're actually trying to press is so much better. It's just, the era of physical keyboards on phones is long gone.
It's done. There's no reason whatsoever.
I can't imagine any company like going to BlackBerry and trying to license it again if their intention is to like make keyboard phones.
Absolutely. It's interesting. But look, the reality is it's the end of an era again.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through this with BlackBerry. And I have to say, I am fond of that name, that brand, simply because it's like Nokia, who is also in its second zombie incarnation. It feels to me like there's an aspect of nostalgia. There's an aspect of a brand that was at the top of their game at one point and lost the plot through idiotic politics and other, shenanigans. And there was so many parallels between Nokia and their failure and their comeback, and BlackBerry and their failure and their comeback. It was uncanny. It's almost like I want somebody to resuscitate the Lumia line next, just for shits and giggles.
I mean, Microsoft could probably do that. If they
Yeah, but they're
wanted.
not. They're going Surface
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's not gonna happen. But I just I don't know. I feel nostalgic. I think all this being at Moto here and having Razrs around and stuff. I'm just like super nostalgic. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
what
mean,
it is.
yeah, BlackBerry was a smartphone before smartphones were
So
a thing
was
people cared
Nokia.
about.
Nokia had a
Yes,
freaking
this
app store
like Symbian
before
was.
Apple's app store was a glimmer in somebody's
Yeah,
brain
like
at Cupertino.
the Symbian platform, like back in the day, it was an amazing thing for the time. Like,
I mean, it
it's
was
crazy.
kind of convoluted, but like I remember with my N95 Symbian phone, which came out 6 months before the iPhone was announced. I had a 5 megapixel autofocus camera on this thing that could do, 640, like basically, 480p video, VGA video, 640 by 480, not in widescreen. But that thing was, had GPS, had Wi-Fi, had Bluetooth, had a front camera for calls, for selfies. Like we're talking things that we take for granted totally normally now. But when the iPhone came out, it had 3G at the time. The iPhone didn't have 3G, didn't have front camera, had a bad rear camera, had, it was so deficient in so many ways compared to that Symbian phone. Yet, totally blew us away in terms of its user experience, right? And now we have the best of both worlds. Now we have all of that. All that in one. Yeah. All that for, what is it, Poco phone, $225?
Yeah. What a time to be alive.
It's amazing. It's so cool. Yeah, so that's it. That's the show, folks. I feel like we've gone through everything. Any final thoughts on the Moto G and our general visit at Moto that you want to share?
I'm looking forward to these phones. I hope that they live up to our expectations. I think both of us are reasonably excited by these devices, and I would like to see Motorola get a win. I want to make sure Motorola continues being a thing. One
of the things that I've noticed has started happening last year with the G7, and we're starting to see with the G series again this year, is that they're going away from the glass and metal construction that they had. So I'm not sure, I didn't check, so the G6 was kind of a pinnacle point, an inflection point in the G series, because it was a glass and aluminum sandwich. Yeah. It was true glass, true aluminum frame, just like that Poco we thought was plastic.
One of the phones last year was glass.
Right, so the G7 last year had a plastic frame, a resin frame actually, very, very sturdy, felt a lot like aluminum. It was machined, so it was very nice, but then it had glass back, and then the Power had a plastic back. Yeah. But this year, I can tell you, I don't know for a fact because we didn't ask. I actually forgot to ask them that question, but we'll discover it when we finally get devices. But from my quick hands-on time, and you should check out our hands-on video, folks, by the way, our respective videos on Android Police and on my channel as well. My experience here is that this is a plastic back that looks and feels like glass with a resin chassis. So we're going back to what the Moto G5 was like, which was plastic and
I think that is the case. Yeah.
And I think, it's bad in a way because we're losing that thing. I thought that, once the G6 did it, all of them would do it, but they've gone back. And I think that's a cost saving. And it's a bummer, but at the same time, I think for this market, for this segment, people put their phones in cases anyway, so who cares, right?
Yeah. I think that's kind of why like Moto Mods never really took off.
Yeah,
it's like everybody's going to put their phone in a case anyway.
Totally, right. So, Brian, do you want to tell the world where they can find you on the internet, your Twitter handle?
I am on the Twitters. I'm at Ryan Whitwam, and you can and should read Android Police every single day. That is where we post all about the Android news.
That's right. But you also write on other sites, so
I am
tell
also
people where they can find you.
I am also on Extreme Tech. Go there and read all about science and technology. And I do the Android device guides for the Wirecutter. So if you want to buy a thing, you want to know what the best thing is.
Buy a thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if the G series ended up somewhere in there. I mean, I think it did in the past, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think right now it is a runner-up pick. I think that the a Nokia is top of our list right now. But I would have to look to make sure. We're actually in the middle of updating that guide, so that's going to change soonish. We'll see.
Well, there you go, folks. And you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. Like the comic book character, just drop the vowels instead. And Twitter is actually the place you want to make comments on the show, because really there's no way to comment in a podcasting app. So want to talk to me about the show? Go on Twitter and talk at me at Tankgirl. And then same handle for Instagram. If you want to see pretty pictures of phones and pictures taken with phones, you should check out Instagram. I just got a Honor V30, not the Pro, but the V30, a forbidden fruit with 5G, which will not work on any networks here, the 5G part. But I think it's going to be an interesting phone because, again, if I re-enable GMS like I've been doing on my Mate 30 Pro and some other phones I've received from Huawei and Honor, it makes it a perfectly viable device. So stay tuned for that. Check out the Instagram. Also, we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mobile Tech Podcast in one word. We finally got that URL a couple of weeks back, so now you can just go to that and check out some of the videos there. We do some hands-on videos. You'll see the G series phones. We do some unboxings, actually a lot of unboxings, so check that out. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff on the videos, of course, on YouTube. You can comment on the videos on YouTube if you want. That would be greatly appreciated. If you do subscribe to the podcast, there's a bunch of ways you can do that. Please rate us and write a review. Some platforms support that. Platforms that we're on, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Spotify. So we're easy to find. And then if you're old school and you like RSS feeds or you just want to listen to the podcast on the web somehow, mobiletechpodcast.com is where it's at. That's mobiletechpodcast.com. Finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible is where it's at for audiobooks. If you like to listen to books instead of read them, that's the way to go. Like maybe you're driving on a road trip across the country and you want to listen to some books because you can't read them. Well, that's it. Audible's got you covered. Check it out. They have an incredible selection of books, and some of them read by the authors, which is my favorite thing. I'm about to start binging on a major Star Wars thing. They always come out with a book version of the movie. 2 years ago, it was 21 hours long. It was insane. And so the reason I'm bringing up Audible is they're a sponsor of the show, and if you want to support the show, if you want to help us out, you can join Audible with a 30-day free trial. And this 30-day free trial is awesome because at the end you get to keep some of the books, whether you stay or not, which is great. And no matter what, it supports the show and helps us out. So you should do that. In the show notes is a link, and I'm going to give it to you verbally right now so you can try to join and help us out. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. Please consider joining Audible and supporting the podcast. We really appreciate it. And that's it, folks. Ryan, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
I was happy to be here.
Fantastic. We'll definitely have you on again at some point in the future. And you know, folks, that Samsung is happening next week, so I'll have another show with another guest and we'll tell you all about it. So stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.